Welcome back to another story on Infidelity Tales Lab. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Setup. Jordan Faulkner pulled into his mother's driveway. The familiar crunch of gravel under his tires is a comforting sound after a long week. At 34, Jordan had built a successful construction business from nothing, his calloused hands and sharp mind earning him respect in a town that didn't give it easily. His military background, 8 years as an Army Ranger, had taught him patience, strategy, and most importantly, how to read situations that others missed. The divorce from Melissa Valentine had been brutal, but Jordan had fought for and won joint custody of his 8-year-old son, Nate. Every other week, Nate stayed with Jordan's mother, Thelma Faulkner, a spry 70-year-old retired teacher who spoiled her grandson rotten. It was an arrangement that worked for everyone, except Melissa, who'd fought tooth and nail to keep Nate from Jordan entirely. Melissa Valentine had been the town beauty queen once, all blonde hair and sharp smiles. But behind that pageant-perfect exterior lurked something cold and calculating. Jordan had learned that the hard way during their 5-year marriage, watching her manipulate situations to her advantage, playing victim when caught in lies, and using their son as a weapon whenever she didn't get her way. Their relationship had soured when Jordan discovered Melissa's affair with Roger Crow, a slick-talking real estate developer who'd blown into town 2 years ago with big promises and bigger debts. Roger was everything Jordan wasn't: flashy, smooth, and fundamentally dishonest. While Jordan built things with his hands, Roger built castles in the air and convinced others to pay for them. The custody battle had been vicious. Melissa had tried every trick in the book: false accusations, coached testimony from friends, even attempting to turn Nate against his father. But Jordan's military record, his stable business, and his mother's spotless reputation had won the day. The judge, a no-nonsense woman named Patricia Wong, had seen through Melissa's performance and awarded joint custody, much to Melissa's fury. Now, as Jordan stepped out of his pickup truck, something felt wrong. The porch light was off, which was unusual. His mother always left it on when she knew he was coming. More concerning was the silver Toyota Tacoma parked beside his mother's old Buick. He recognized that truck. It belonged to Melissa. Jordan's instincts, honed by years in hostile territory, kicked into high gear. Melissa had no business being here. According to their custody agreement, she wasn't supposed to have contact with Nate during Jordan's weeks, and she certainly had no reason to be at his mother's house. He approached the house quietly, his construction boots silent on the wooden porch steps. The front windows were dark, but he could see light coming from the kitchen at the back of the house. Moving with the stealth that had kept him alive in Afghanistan, Jordan crept around the side of the house toward the kitchen window. What he needed to see would change everything. Chapter 2. The Discovery. Jordan pressed himself against the side of the house, staying in the shadows as he approached the kitchen window. The voices inside were muffled, but he could make out his ex-wife's sharp tone and another voice. Male, unfamiliar. Where was his mother? Where was Nate? Peering through the window, Jordan's blood ran cold. Melissa sat at his mother's kitchen table across from a man he didn't recognize. Lean, nervous, with the look of someone who'd spent time in uncomfortable places. On the table between them were documents, photographs, and what looked like a small recording device. But it was what the stranger was saying that made Jordan's hand instinctively reach for his phone. Bruises on the kid's arms will be convincing enough, the man was saying, his voice carrying the flat accent of someone from up north. And with the testimony about his violent episodes, the judge won't have any choice but to revoke custody. Melissa leaned forward, her perfectly manicured nails drumming on the table. You're sure the photos look real, Santos? If this falls apart... Lady, I've been doing this for 15 years, Santos Donahue interrupted. Fake abuse photos are my specialty. By the time I'm done, it'll look like your ex-husband's been using the kid as a punching bag. Jordan's jaw clenched. Santos. He remembered that name from somewhere. Then it hit him. Santos Donahue had been arrested 3 years ago for falsifying evidence in custody cases, but the charges had been dropped on a technicality. He'd move his operation from Chicago to smaller towns where background checks were less thorough. What about the old lady? Santos continued. My mother-in-law is visiting her sister in Florida for the week, Melissa said with a cold smile. Perfect timing. And I made sure Nate ate plenty of sugar tonight. He'll be cranky and emotional tomorrow. Exactly what we need for the photos. Jordan felt sick. They were planning to frame him for child abuse, using fake evidence and manipulating his own son. But where was Nate now? As if reading his thoughts, Santos asked, Where's the kid? Sleeping upstairs in his grandmother's room, Melissa replied. I gave him some of those children's sleep aids. He'll be out for hours. Plenty of time to get the staging done and make sure our stories align. That was it. Jordan had heard enough. They were drugging his son and planning to fake abuse photos. His fingers moved quickly over his phone, starting a voice recording app he'd installed for work meetings. He needed evidence of their conspiracy before calling the police. Now, about my payment, Santos said, pulling out a worn leather portfolio. Half now, half when the custody gets transferred. Roger's handling the money, Melissa said. He should be here any minute with the cash. Roger Crow. Of course he was involved. Jordan watched as Melissa pulled out her own phone and sent text. Within minutes, headlights swept across the kitchen window as another vehicle pulled into the driveway. Jordan moved quickly but quietly to get a better view. Roger's black BMW parked behind Melissa's truck, effectively boxing in all three vehicles. Roger stepped out, looking as slick as ever in his expensive suit, carrying a briefcase that undoubtedly contained the payment for Santos's services. This was bigger than just a custody grab. This was a coordinated attack designed to destroy Jordan's relationship with his son and probably his reputation in the community. But they made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated him. Jordan continued recording as Roger entered the kitchen. Through the window, he watched the three conspirators huddle around the table, reviewing their plan. Melissa showed Roger the fake photos Santos had created, and Jordan's stomach turned as he saw images that appeared to show bruises and marks on a child who looked remarkably like Nate. This is perfect, Roger said, his voice carrying clearly through the window. Once Jordan loses custody, Melissa and I can move forward with the development deal. That property of his will be worth a fortune once we get the zoning changed. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place. This wasn't just about custody, it was about Jordan's land. His 20-acre plot on the outskirts of town sat directly in the path of Roger's proposed luxury development. Jordan had repeatedly refused to sell, knowing the land had been in his family for 3 generations. And if he doesn't want to sell after losing his son? Melissa asked. Roger's smile was predatory. Let's just say a man dealing with child abuse allegations might find it hard to get construction contracts. Amazing how fast a business can fail when the right people start asking questions about someone's character. They were planning to destroy his entire life, his relationship with his son, his business, his family's legacy, all for money and spite. Jordan had heard enough, but instead of calling the police immediately, he continued recording. These 3 had just handed him everything he needed to destroy them completely. And unlike them, he wouldn't need to break any laws to do it. He just needed to be smarter than they were. And that, Jordan knew, wouldn't be difficult. Chapter 3, The Investigation. Jordan backed away from the window and moved to his truck, his mind racing. He could call the police now and stop their immediate plan, but these 3 would likely find another way to come after him. He needed to think bigger, to gather enough evidence to ensure they couldn't threaten his family ever again. His phone buzzed with a text from his mother. Having wonderful time with Patricia. Nate sleeping soundly. See you Sunday. Love, Mom. Nate was safe for now, and his mother was indeed in Florida, just as Melissa had said. That gave Jordan time to work. He drove to his office, a converted warehouse on the edge of town where Faulkner Construction kept its equipment and files. Jordan had always been meticulous about record keeping, another habit from his military days, and he had a feeling those records might prove useful. Pulling up everything he had on Roger Crow and his development company, Crow Holdings LLC, Jordan began to see a pattern. Roger had done this before in at least 3 other small towns. In each case, he'd targeted local business owners who owned land he needed, finding ways to pressure them into selling far below market value. In Henderson, Kentucky, a family farm owner had been arrested on drug charges that were later dropped when no evidence materialized. In Millerville, Ohio, a small business owner had faced a barrage of OSHA violations that mysteriously disappeared after he sold his property. And in Carver, Indiana, a single father had lost custody of his children due to abuse allegations that were later proven false. But by then, he'd already lost his land to pay legal fees. Jordan cross-referenced the timeline with Melissa's actions over the past 6 months. Her sudden interest in reconciliation talks, her questions about his business and property, her new friendship with several of his competitors. It all made sense now. She'd been gathering intelligence for Roger from the beginning. But Jordan had an advantage they didn't know about. His military service had included intelligence work, and he'd maintained contacts in various agencies. More importantly, he learned that the most effective warfare happened when your enemies defeated themselves. He made a series of careful phone calls. First to his lawyer, Bradley Glenn, a sharp former prosecutor who specialized in custody cases. Then to Detective Lisa Raymond of the County Sheriff's Department, an old friend who'd served 2 tours in Iraq before joining law enforcement. Finally, to Ivan Sandoval, an investigative journalist who'd been tracking Roger Crow's activities across multiple states. By midnight, Jordan had assembled a team and a plan. But first, he needed to secure Nate and gather more evidence. Returning to his mother's house, Jordan used the spare key hidden under the porch planter to enter through the back door. The conspirators had left hours ago, but their presence lingered like a bad smell. He found Nate sleeping peacefully in his grandmother's bed, looking innocent and small in the big 4-poster bed. Jordan gently checked his son for any signs of the drugs Melissa had mentioned. Nate's breathing was deep and steady, his pulse normal. Whatever she'd given him wasn't dangerous, probably just an over-the-counter sleep aid. Still, Jordan made a note to have him checked by a doctor the next day. Searching the house, Jordan found evidence of their presence. Fingerprints on the table, a coffee cup with lipstick marks, and most importantly, a flash drive that had fallen behind the kitchen table. Santos had been careless in his hurry to leave. Back at his office, Jordan plugged in the flash drive. What he found made his blood boil, but also filled him with grim satisfaction. Santos kept meticulous records of his work. Photos, client information, payment records, and most damning of all, a detailed methodology for creating convincing fake abuse evidence. There are dozens of cases, dozens of families destroyed by this man's work. Children separated from loving parents, lives ruined, all for money. And at the center of it all were people like Melissa and Roger, willing to sacrifice anything and anyone for their own gain. Jordan studied each case, learning Santos's methods, identifying patterns in how these schemes operated. Knowledge was power, and he was building an arsenal. As dawn broke over the horizon, Jordan finalized his plan. These 3 thought they were playing chess, but they'd actually sat down to a poker game with a professional gambler. They were about to learn that when you come for Jordan Faulkner's family, you'd better be prepared to lose everything. The recording from the kitchen window was just the beginning. By the time Jordan was finished, Melissa, Roger, and Santos would wish they'd never heard his name. But first, he had to let them make their move. The best traps, Jordan knew, were the ones that used the enemy's own momentum against them. Chapter 4. The Counter Game. Jordan spent Sunday morning playing the perfect, unsuspecting father. He picked up Nate from his mother's house, made pancakes for breakfast, and took his son to the park. To any observer, he was simply a devoted dad enjoying time with his boy. But behind his calm exterior, Jordan was setting the stage for what would come next. Nate seemed normal, chatty about his week with Grandma Thelma, and excited about starting 3rd grade in a few weeks. There were no signs of the sleep aids Melissa had mentioned, confirming Jordan's assessment that they hadn't been harmful. Still, he made a mental note of everything, knowing that attention to detail would be crucial in the days ahead. Monday morning brought the expected call from Child Protective Services. Caseworker Janet Sampson had received an anonymous tip about potential abuse and needed to schedule an immediate interview with both Jordan and Nate. Jordan expressed appropriate concern and cooperation, agreeing to meet that afternoon. What CPS didn't know was that Jordan had already contacted his lawyer, Bradley Glenn, who'd spent the weekend preparing for exactly this scenario. Bradley had reviewed the flash drive contents and was already building a defense strategy that would turn the tables on the accusers. The CPS interview went exactly as Jordan expected. Janet Sampson was professional but thorough, examining Nate for any signs of abuse. She found none, of course, but Jordan could see the confusion in her eyes. Someone had clearly prepared her to expect evidence that simply wasn't there. Mr. Faulkner, Janet said carefully, we received some very specific allegations. Photographs were mentioned. Photographs? Jordan asked, his tone perfectly calibrated between confusion and concern. I don't understand. May I ask who made these allegations? That information is confidential, but Bradley Glenn chose that moment to arrive, having been delayed by traffic. His timing was perfect, interrupting the interview just as Janet was about to reveal more details than she should have. My client is fully cooperating, Bradley announced, but I trust this investigation will be conducted with the same vigor toward false accusers as it would be toward actual abusers. The seed was planted. Jordan could see Janet processing the implications that someone might have filed a false report. That evening, Jordan received a call from Detective Lisa Raymond. Jordan, we need to talk. Privately. They met at Murphy's Diner, a 24-hour truck stop on the highway where the noise would mask their conversation. Lisa, a compact woman with prematurely gray hair and intelligent eyes, had served as a military police officer in Iraq before joining civilian law enforcement. She'd earned Jordan's respect and friendship during their overlapping deployments. Someone's playing games, Lisa said without preamble, sliding a manila folder across the table. Anonymous tip came in this morning about you abusing your son. Included some pretty convincing photos. Jordan opened the folder and felt his anger spike. The photos were exactly what he'd expected from Santos's flash drive. Carefully staged images that appear to show bruising and marks on a child who looked like Nate. The work was professional, nearly impossible to distinguish from real abuse photos without expert analysis. Lisa, I need you to trust me on this, Jordan said, meeting her eyes. Someone is trying to frame me, and I think I know who, but I need time to prove it. Lisa studied his face for a long moment. Talk to me. Jordan told her everything. The scene at his mother's house, the recording, the flash drive, the conspiracy he'd uncovered. Lisa listened without interruption, her expression growing darker with each revelation. You recorded them planning this? She asked. Every word. And I have the flash drive with Santos's other cases. Lisa, this man has been destroying families for years. Lisa was quiet for a moment, then leaned forward. Jordan, you know I can't ignore evidence of child abuse, even if I believe you're innocent. I'm not asking you to ignore it. I'm asking you to investigate it properly. Run the photos through analysis, check for digital manipulation. Look into Santos Donahue's background, and give me 48 hours before you move on any of this. Why 48 hours? Jordan's smile was cold. Because in 48 hours, you're going to have a much bigger case to work on. Lisa studied him for another moment, then nodded. 48 hours. But Jordan, whatever you're planning, don't do anything that'll force me to arrest you. Trust me, Jordan said. When this is over, you'll be arresting the right people. As they parted ways, Jordan felt the familiar calm that came before action. He'd spent the last day gathering intelligence and positioning his pieces. Now it was time to start the real game. Melissa, Roger, and Santos thought they were hunting him. They had no idea they'd walked into a trap that had been 3 years in the making. Chapter 5. The trap is set. Tuesday morning, Jordan received another expected call, this time from Roger Crow himself, suggesting they meet to discuss Nate's situation. The pretense of concern in Roger's voice was laughable, but Jordan played along, agreeing to meet at Roger's office that afternoon. Before the meeting, Jordan made several strategic moves. First, he visited his old Army buddy Clint Wolf, who now ran a private security firm. Clint specialized in surveillance and had access to equipment that wasn't available to civilians. Within an hour, Jordan had micro cameras and recording devices that would make Santos's setup look like amateur hour. Next, he stopped by the office of Ivan Sandoval, the investigative journalist who'd been tracking Roger's activities. Ivan was a thin, intense man in his 40s who'd made a career of exposing small-town corruption. He'd been waiting for someone with concrete evidence against Roger Crow for over a year. "I can't use illegally obtained recordings in a story," Ivan said, reviewing Jordan's materials, "but I can definitely investigate these allegations independently. And if someone were to tip me off about where to be at the right time." "Hypothetically speaking," Jordan replied with a smile. The meeting with Roger took place in Crow Holdings' office, a flashy space designed to impress small-town clients. Roger had decorated it with photos of previous developments, all gleaming modern buildings that had transformed underutilized land into profitable ventures. "Jordan, I hear you're having some problems," Roger began, his tone oozing false sympathy. "Custody issues can be so difficult, especially when there are allegations." "What do you know about allegations?" Jordan asked, keeping his voice neutral. "Only what everyone in town is talking about. Word gets around fast in a place this size." Roger leaned back in his leather chair, studying Jordan's reaction. "You know, with all the stress you must be under, maybe this would be a good time to consider my offer on your property. Get some liquid assets, start fresh somewhere new." There was the real purpose of the meeting. Roger was moving faster than Jordan had expected, trying to close the deal while Jordan was supposedly distracted by the custody crisis. "I appreciate the offer," Jordan said, "but that land means everything to me. It's where I plan to build Nate's future." Roger's mask slipped slightly. "Jordan, be realistic. With child abuse allegations hanging over your head, do you really think you'll have a future with Nate? Maybe it's time to cut your losses." The threat was clear, but Jordan had expected it. "You know what, Roger? You're right. Maybe I should consider all my options." He paused, as if making a difficult decision. "Give me until Friday to think about it." "Friday?" Roger seemed surprised by the quick capitulation. "Yeah, by Friday, I should know where I stand with Nate. If things go badly, maybe a fresh start somewhere else is exactly what I need." Roger's smile returned, shark-like and satisfied. "I think that's very wise, Jordan. Very wise indeed." As Jordan left the office, he could practically see Roger calculating his profits. What Roger didn't know was that Jordan had just given himself exactly the timeline he needed. By Friday, the trap would be sprung and Roger Crow would be the one looking for a fresh start, preferably in a federal prison. That evening, Jordan made another crucial move. He called Melissa directly, something he rarely did outside of emergencies. "What do you want, Jordan?" Her voice was cold, but he could hear the tension underneath. "I want to talk about Nate. About us. Maybe we've been doing this all wrong." The pause on the other end told him everything he needed to know. Melissa was suspicious, but intrigued. "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe it's time we put Nate's needs first. I've been thinking about what's best for him, and I'm wondering if we should consider changing our custody arrangement." "You want to give up custody?" Melissa couldn't hide the excitement in her voice. "I want to discuss it. Face to face. Thursday night, after Nate's asleep. Your place." "Jordan, that's very mature of you. I'm trying to grow up, Melissa. For Nate's sake." After ending the call, Jordan smiled grimly. Melissa would spend the next 2 days preparing for a conversation that would never happen the way she expected. And by Thursday night, she'd be walking into the final act of her own downfall. The pieces were moving exactly as Jordan had planned. His enemies thought they were closing in for the kill, but they were actually positioning themselves for checkmate. Chapter 6: The Noose Tightens. Wednesday brought developments that confirmed Jordan's suspicions about the scope of the conspiracy against him. 2 of his biggest construction contracts were suddenly under review for unspecified safety concerns. His bank called to discuss irregularities in his business account, and 3 former employees called to warn him that someone had been asking questions about his work practices and treatment of staff. Roger Crow was moving fast, using his connections to apply pressure from multiple angles. It was a coordinated attack designed to force Jordan into selling his land while dealing with custody allegations. If Jordan had been the simple contractor they believed him to be, the strategy might have worked. But Jordan Faulkner was not simple, and he'd spent the last 48 hours turning their own weapons against them. working with Detective Lisa Raymond, who'd confirmed that the abuse photos were sophisticated digital fabrications. Jordan had built an ironclad case against Santos Donahue. The flash drive contained evidence of dozens of similar conspiracies across multiple states. Federal charges were being prepared. Journalist Ivan Sandoval had traced Rogers' pattern of property acquisition and found a trail of suspicious circumstances in each town he'd operated. Small business owners forced to sell under pressure, allegations that materialized from nowhere and disappeared just as quickly, and a network of associates who specialized in creating problems for anyone who stood in Rogers' way. Most importantly, Jordan had spent Tuesday night installing Clint Wolf surveillance equipment throughout his own property and mother's house. Every conversation, every move his enemies made was being recorded in high definition with crystal clear audio. Thursday evening arrived with unseasonable storm clouds gathering over the town. Jordan had spent the day playing his role perfectly. The stressed father considering giving up custody. The struggling businessman facing mounting pressure. Several people had approached him with sympathetic offers to help by purchasing his land, all of them connected to Rogers' network. At 8 p.m., Jordan arrived at Melissa's apartment, a modest two-bedroom place that Roger had been paying for since their affair began. What Melissa didn't know was that Jordan had discovered the financial connection months earlier. Roger had been supporting her as part of the long-term plan to separate Jordan from his land. Melissa answered the door wearing a dress that had probably cost more than most people made in a week. Roger's money was treating her well, but Jordan could see the stress beneath the makeup. The custody scheme was making her nervous. "Jordan, come in. I made coffee." The living room was decorated with photos of Nate and Melissa, but Jordan noticed that any pictures including him had been removed. Even the family photos from their marriage had been cropped to exclude him. It was a small detail, but it spoke to Melissa's calculating nature. "You said you wanted to talk about custody," Melissa began, settling onto the couch with practiced elegance. "I do. But first, I think you should know that I'm aware of your plan." Melissa's face went carefully blank. "What plan?" Jordan pulled out his phone and played the recording from Monday night. Melissa's face went white as her own voice filled the room, discussing fake photos and drugging their son. "You recorded us?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "I did, along with Santos's entire operation and Rogers' financial backing of your lifestyle." Jordan's voice remained calm, but his eyes were steel. "Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out, Melissa? Did you forget what I used to do for a living?" Melissa's shock quickly transformed into anger. "You can't use that recording. It's illegal. You were trespassing. Actually, I was on my mother's property with permission, observing criminal activity in progress. The recording is perfectly legal and admissible." Jordan leaned forward. "But I'm not here to threaten you, Melissa. I'm here to offer you a choice." "What kind of choice?" "You can cooperate with the FBI investigation into Rogers' operation, testify against Santos, and serve as a witness rather than a defendant. In exchange, you'll retain visitation rights with Nate and avoid federal charges for conspiracy to commit perjury and child endangerment." Melissa stared at him. "FBI? Oh yes. Santos's operation crosses state lines, which makes it a federal case. And Rogers' pattern of property manipulation through false accusations? That's racketeering. The kind of charges that come with decades in federal prison. You're bluffing." Jordan's phone buzzed with a text message. He glanced at it and smiled. "Actually, I'm not. That message is from Agent Caroline McKay of the FBI's White Collar Crime Division. She'll be arriving in town tomorrow to begin arrests. The question is whether your name is on the arrest warrant or the witness list." The color drained from Melissa's face completely. "Jordan, we never meant for it to go this far. Roger said it would just be a simple custody change, that nobody would get hurt. You drug our son, Melissa. You conspired to fake abuse photos. You've been helping Roger destroy other families across multiple states." Jordan's voice remained level, but the disgust was clear. "Someone was always going to get hurt. You just thought it would be me instead of you." Melissa began to cry, the carefully constructed facade finally cracking. "What do you want from me?" "The truth. All of it. Roger's plans, Santos's methods, every detail of how you've been involved. You're going to wear a wire to your meeting with Roger tomorrow night, and get him to confess everything. He'll kill me if he finds out. He'll have bigger problems than you to worry about. By tomorrow night, Santos will already be in federal custody, and Roger will be desperate to save himself. He'll probably try to pin everything on you anyway. Jordan stood up, straightening his jacket. You have until tomorrow morning to decide, Melissa. Cooperate, and you might see Nate grow up from a visitation center. Don't cooperate, and you'll see him through prison glass. As he walked toward the door, Melissa called out, "Why are you doing this? Why not just turn us in now?" Jordan paused at the threshold. "Because I want to make sure all of you pay for what you've done. Not just to me and Nate, but to every family you've destroyed. This isn't just about custody, it's about justice." Outside, the storm clouds had begun to release their burden, fat raindrops spattering against Jordan's windshield as he drove home. Tomorrow would bring the end game, and Jordan intended to ensure that when the storm cleared, his enemies would be left with nothing but the consequences of their own greed and cruelty. Chapter 7. The Reckoning. Friday morning arrived with crystal clear skies, as if the storm had washed the air clean for what was to come. Jordan woke early, his mind sharp and focused. Today, 3 years of careful planning and 48 hours of intensive preparation would come to fruition. Melissa had called at dawn, her voice shaky but determined. She'd agreed to cooperate, but Jordan could hear the fear underneath her resolve. Roger had contacted her the night before, moving their meeting up to that afternoon. He was getting nervous about the custody case proceeding too slowly. FBI agent Caroline McKay arrived in town on the 10 a.m. train, along with a team of federal agents and forensic accountants. Jordan met with them in Bradley Glenn's office, where they reviewed the evidence one final time. The recording from Monday night, Santos's flash drive, financial records linking Roger to previous schemes, and now Melissa's cooperation had created an unbreakable case. "Mr. Faulkner," Agent McKay said, her voice professional but warm, "I want you to know that your evidence has connected dots we've been trying to connect for 3 years. Roger Crow and Santos Donahue are part of a larger network that's been operating across the Midwest. Your case might be the key to bringing down the entire operation." At noon, Santos was arrested at his motel room. He'd been packing to leave town, clearly spooked by something. When federal agents found his equipment for creating fake abuse photos, along with detailed records of over 50 cases, Santos immediately began trying to negotiate a deal. "He's singing like a canary," Detective Lisa Raymond reported to Jordan, "giving up names, locations, methods, everything. Apparently, he's been keeping detailed records as insurance against exactly this situation." The afternoon brought the main event. Melissa, wearing the wire provided by the FBI, met Roger at his office for what he believed was a celebration of their impending victory. What Roger didn't know was that federal agents were positioned around the building, and Jordan was watching from the surveillance van with Agent McKay. "Did you see Faulkner's face when CPS showed up?" Roger's voice came through clearly on the wire. "Exactly like that farmer in Henderson. These military types always think they're so tough until the system turns against them." "Roger, I'm having second thoughts about this," Melissa said, following the script they prepared. "Maybe we went too far with the photos." "Too far?" Roger laughed. "Melissa, those photos are going to make us rich. Once Faulkner loses custody and his business falls apart, he'll sell that land for pennies on the dollar. We're talking about a $30 million development here. But what if someone finds out they're fake? Who's going to find out? Santos is a professional, and even if someone questions them, Faulkner will be too busy defending himself to mount a proper investigation. By the time anyone figures out what really happened, we'll be long gone with our money." Agent McKay smiled grimly. "That's conspiracy to commit wire fraud, racketeering, and about 6 other federal charges. This man just confessed to a multi-state criminal enterprise." On the wire, Melissa pressed for more details. "What about the other families? You mentioned this had worked before. Same playbook every time. Find a property owner who won't sell, identify their weakness, apply pressure until they break. That farm in Henderson, father was a widower, so we used child endangerment. The restaurant owner in Millerville, health department violations that mysteriously appeared overnight. It's all about knowing which buttons to push." Jordan listened as Roger detailed a criminal operation that had destroyed dozens of families and stolen millions of dollars in property. Each revelation made the case stronger and Jordan's satisfaction deeper. "What about Santos?" Melissa asked. "Santos gets paid and disappears, like always. The beauty of this system is that by the time anyone realizes what happened, all the players have moved on to the next town. But what if Faulkner doesn't sell?" Roger's voice turned cold. "Oh, he'll sell. Men like Faulkner break eventually. They all do. And if financial pressure doesn't work, there are other methods. I know people who specialize in making problems go away permanently." That statement made Agent McKay sit up straight. "Did he just threaten murder?" "He sure did," Jordan replied. "And now you have it on tape." The trap was complete. Roger had confessed to federal crimes, detailed his criminal organization, and threatened murder, all while believing he was celebrating his victory with his conspirator. At 4 p.m., federal agents simultaneously arrested Roger Crowe at his office and raided Santos's motel room for additional evidence. The multi-state criminal enterprise that had operated for over 5 years was effectively decapitated in a single afternoon. Jordan picked up Nate from school that day, knowing his son was safe and their future was secure. As they drove home, Nate chattered about his day, completely unaware of how close he'd come to being used as a weapon against his father. "Dad, why do you look so happy?" Nate asked. Jordan glanced at his son in the rearview mirror. "Just a good day at work, buddy. Sometimes the good guys win." "Cool. Can we get pizza for dinner?" "Absolutely. We're celebrating." As they pulled into their driveway, Jordan's phone buzzed with a text from Bradley Glenn. "All charges against you have been dropped. Melissa wants to discuss an uncontested revision to your custody agreement." "Congratulations, you've got your life back." But Jordan knew he'd done more than just get his life back. He'd protected his son, preserved his family's legacy, and ensured that Roger Crowe and Santos Donahue would never destroy another family. The trap had worked perfectly. Chapter 8, The Fallout. The following week brought a parade of revelations that rocked the small town of Millfield. The arrest of Roger Crowe and Santos Donahue had opened floodgates that no one had expected, including Jordan. Federal investigators, led by Agent McKay, had discovered that Roger's operation was far more extensive than anyone had imagined. Using Santos's meticulous records and Roger's own financial documents, they'd uncovered a network spanning 12 states and involving dozens of co-conspirators. Property worth over $100 million had been acquired through fraud, intimidation, and fabricated legal troubles. Jordan pulled his son into a hug, feeling the satisfaction of a plan executed perfectly and enemies defeated completely. "I learned a long time ago that the best way to win a fight is to make your enemies fight each other." "What does that mean?" "It means sometimes the smartest thing to do is let bad people destroy themselves." As they finished homework and prepared for dinner, Jordan reflected on how completely the tables had turned. 3 weeks ago, he'd been facing the loss of his son, his business, and his family's legacy. Tonight, he was stronger than ever. His enemies were in prison, and his future with Nate was secure. The best revenge, Jordan had learned, wasn't getting even. It was getting everything. Chapter 9, Justice Served. 6 months later, Jordan stood in the courthouse watching Roger Crowe receive his final sentence. The federal judge, a stern woman in her 60s who'd clearly been disgusted by the evidence presented, had just sentenced Roger to 3 consecutive life terms for racketeering, fraud, and conspiracy charges. Roger had aged years in the months since his arrest. The smooth, confident developer had been replaced by a broken man in an orange jumpsuit who'd learned that federal prison didn't care about his charm or connections. "Your Honor," Roger had said during his final statement, "I was just trying to build a business. These charges are excessive." Judge Patricia Martinez had cut him off. "Mr. Crowe, your business destroyed 57 families across 12 states. Children were separated from their parents. People lost homes that had been in their families for generations. Elderly property owners were driven into bankruptcy by fabricated legal troubles. This court has rarely seen such a calculated, systematic campaign of cruelty and greed." Santos Donahue had received his sentence the previous month, 25 years federal time with no possibility of parole. His cooperation had helped convict the entire network, but it hadn't saved him from justice. The judge in his case had been particularly harsh, noting that Santos's crimes had involved children and vulnerable families. Melissa had avoided prison entirely, thanks to her cooperation and genuine remorse. She'd received 5 years of probation and was required to perform 500 hours of community service, working with families affected by custody fraud. More importantly, she'd begun therapy and seemed to be genuinely trying to become a better person and mother. The supervised visitation was going well. Nate saw his mother every other weekend, but always with a social worker present. It wasn't ideal, but it was healing for both Melissa and Nate. "She's trying, Dad," Nate had told Jordan after one recent visit. "She says she's sorry for making bad choices." Jordan was proud of his son's maturity and willingness to forgive. At 9 years old, Nate was showing more wisdom than most adults. The property settlements had been equally satisfying. Jordan's land, originally worth about $2 million, had increased in value significantly once Rogers' development plans were revealed and legitimately pursued by an honest developer. The irony wasn't lost on Jordan. Rogers' vision had been sound, but his methods had been his downfall. Using the money from Rogers' seized assets, Jordan had established the Faulkner Foundation, a nonprofit organization that provided legal assistance to families facing custody fraud and property manipulation schemes. Bradley Glenn had agreed to serve as legal director, and Detective Lisa Raymond was heading up the investigative arm after taking early retirement from the sheriff's department. "We're getting calls from across the country," Lisa reported during a foundation meeting. "Your case has encouraged other victims to come forward. We're building cases in 18 states now." Agent McKay, who'd become a friend during the investigation, kept Jordan updated on the broader network's destruction. 43 arrests so far, with more coming. "The operation you uncovered was the hub of the entire conspiracy. When you took down Roger and Santos, you collapsed the whole thing. But the most satisfying outcome was personal." Jordan's construction business had not only survived the attempted sabotage, but was thriving. The publicity from the case had actually brought him new clients who appreciated his integrity and fighting spirit. He'd had to hire 6 new employees to handle all the work. Standing outside the courthouse after Rogers' sentencing, Jordan felt the weight of 3 years of planning and preparation lift from his shoulders. He'd protected his son, preserved his family's legacy, and ensured that other families wouldn't suffer what his had endured. His phone rang. It was his mother calling from Florida, where she'd decided to extend her stay with her sister. "Jordan, honey, I saw the news. Is it finally over?" "It's over, Mom. You can come home whenever you're ready." "And Nate?" "Nate's perfect, happy, healthy, and excited about starting 4th grade in the fall." "I'm so proud of you," Thelma said, her voice thick with emotion. "Your father will be proud too. You protected our family the way he always taught you to." After ending the call, Jordan picked up Nate from school and took him to their favorite ice cream shop. As they sat on a bench outside, watching cars pass by on Main Street, Nate asked the question Jordan had been expecting. "Dad, are you glad the bad people went to jail?" Jordan considered his answer carefully. "I'm glad that justice was done, buddy. And I'm glad that other families won't have to go through what we did. But are you glad?" Jordan looked at his son, healthy, happy, secure in the knowledge that his father would always protect him. "Yeah, Nate, I'm glad." As they walked back to the truck, Nate slipped his small hand into Jordan's larger one. "Dad, what's up? Next time someone tries to hurt our family, will you stop them again?" Jordan squeezed his son's hand gently. "Every time, buddy. Every single time." Driving home through the town he'd saved from Roger Crow's corruption, Jordan felt the deep satisfaction that came from a job completed perfectly. He'd proven that sometimes the best way to deal with bullies was to be smarter, more patient, and more determined than they were. The trap had been perfect, the revenge complete, and justice had been served exactly as it should be, with his enemies destroying themselves through their own greed and cruelty. Jordan Faulkner had won everything that mattered, and he'd done it the right way. In a world that often rewarded the corrupt and punished the honest, he'd managed to turn the tables completely. Some might call it justice. Jordan called it Tuesday. The war was over, and the good guy had won. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.